The subway station roared with noise trains screeching, people rushing, and footsteps echoing like a storm. But in the middle of it all, a single sound cut through the chaos: the sweet, trembling notes of a violin. Elias, a homeless man with tattered clothes and a scruffy beard, stood in a dim corner, his fingers dancing on the strings. He played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, each note so perfect it felt like the music was alive, breathing, begging to be heard. His eyes were closed, his body swaying, lost in a world no one else could see. But the crowd ignored him. Businessmen in suits hurried past, their eyes glued to their phones. Kids tugged at their parents' hands, not even glancing his way. A few coins clinked into his open violin case, but most people walked by as if he was invisible. Elias didn't care. He played for himself, for the music, for the memory of a life he'd lost. Then, something impossible happened. The crowd parted like a curtain, and a man in a long black coat stepped forward. His face was half hidden by a hat, but his eyes locked onto Elias. The man froze, his jaw dropping as the violin's melody wrapped around him. The subway seemed to hush. People slowed, confused, as if the air itself had changed. The man in the coat pulled off his hat, revealing a face Elias didn't recognize, but one the world knew well. It was Julian Voss, the famous violinist whose concerts sold out stadiums. Julian stepped closer, his eyes wide with shock. You're playing Beethoven like that? Here?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Elias opened his eyes, startled, and the bow slipped, screeching across the strings. The music stopped, the crowd gasped, and Elias's heart pounded. Why was this man staring at him? What did he want? Before Elias could speak, Julian reached into his pocket, pulling out something small and shiny. Was it a coin? A threat? Elias braced himself, his hands shaking on the violin. The story rewinds to 3 days earlier. Elias wasn't always homeless. Once, he had a home, a family, and a dream. He was a music student, the best in his school, with a future so bright it dazzled everyone around him. But life was cruel. A fire took his home, his parents, and his hope. The grief was too heavy, and Elias ran from it all, ending up on the streets with nothing but his violin. It was the only thing that kept him alive. Every day he played in the subway, not for money, but to feel something other than pain. He chose the busiest station in the city where thousands passed daily. Most days, he was invisible. People tossed coins out of pity, but no one listened. Still, Elias poured his soul into every note. Beethoven was his favorite, those songs. Felt like they understood his sadness. He played to forget the cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness. But deep down, he wondered if anyone would ever really hear him. That morning, Elias woke up on a park bench, his violin case clutched to his chest. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He had a new spot in the subway today, a corner where the acoustics were perfect. Maybe today would be different. Maybe someone would stop. As he walked to the station, he noticed a poster on a wall, a concert ad for Julian Voss, the world's greatest violinist. Elias stared at the picture, feeling a pang of envy. "Must be nice," he muttered, "to have the world listen." At the station, he set up his spot and began to play. Hours passed, and the crowd ignored him as usual. But then, a strange feeling crept over him. Someone was watching. He glanced up, and there was a man in a long black coat, standing too still, staring too hard. Elias's fingers faltered, but he kept playing, his heart racing. Who was this man? Why did he look so shocked? The man stepped closer, and Elias's bow slipped, the music screeching to a halt. The crowd muttered, annoyed, but the man didn't care. He was staring at Elias like he'd seen a ghost. You don't belong here, the man said, his voice sharp with wonder. Elias froze, his mind spinning. What did that mean? Was he in trouble? Before he could ask, the man reached into his pocket, and Elias's breath caught. Something was about to happen, something that could change everything. Elias's heart thumped like a drum as the man in the black coat stood before him, hand still in his pocket. The subway's noise faded, and it felt like the world held its breath. Elias gripped his violin, ready to run. Was this man a cop, a thief, or worse? The crowd watched, curious but distant, their phones now pointed at the scene. Elias wanted to disappear, but his feet felt glued to the ground. The man pulled his hand from his pocket, and Elias flinched. But it wasn't a weapon or a coin, it was a small, worn notebook, its edges frayed. The man's eyes softened, and he held it out. I heard you play, he said, his voice low but clear. You're not just good. You're impossible. Elias blinked, confused. The man flipped open the notebook, revealing pages filled with music notes and messy handwriting. I wrote this years ago, he said, pointing to a page. It's mine. And you played it like you knew it. Elias's stomach twisted. He hadn't played anything but Beethoven today. What was this man talking about? I don't know your music, Elias stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The man's face changed, like he was seeing something he couldn't believe. You played a piece I never published, he said. How? The crowd murmured, sensing something big was happening, but Elias felt trapped. He didn't know this man's music. He didn't know him. Yet those eyes, those intense, searching eyes made Elias feel like he was being seen for the first time in years. The man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. My name is Julian Voss, and I need to know who you are. Elias's jaw dropped. Julian Voss? The famous violinist from the poster? Here, in this grimy subway? Elias's mind raced. This had to be a trick. Why would someone like Julian care about a nobody like him? Before Elias could answer, a shout broke the tension. Hey, move it! A subway guard barked, pushing through the crowd. No loitering! Julian turned, his face hardening, but Elias saw his chance. He grabbed his violin case, coin spilling onto the floor, and bolted toward the exit. The story flashes back to the day before. Elias had been playing in his usual spot, but the subway felt different. The air was heavy, like a storm was coming. He'd found a new piece of sheet music that morning, tucked inside his violin case. It wasn't his, but it was beautiful haunting, like Beethoven but wilder, sadder. He didn't know where it came from, but he felt it calling to him. So he played it, letting the notes spill out like tears. No one stopped to listen, but Elias felt alive, like the music was telling his story. That night, he slept under a bridge, the strange music echoing in his dreams. He saw a man in a black coat, watching him from the shadows. In the dream, the man whispered, You're not lost. Elias woke with a start, his heart pounding. Was it just a dream? Or was someone really watching him? He brushed it off, but the feeling lingered. The next morning, he played the mystery music again, and that's when the man in the coat appeared Julian Voss. Back in the present, Elias ran through the subway tunnels, his breath ragged. He could hear footsteps behind him, fast and determined. Was it Julian? The guard? He didn't know, but he couldn't stop. He ducked into a side tunnel, his violin case banging against his side. The music in his head wouldn't stop the strange, beautiful notes from the sheet he'd found. How did Julian know it? Why did he care? Elias stopped, panting, in a quiet corner of the station. He opened his case, hands shaking, and pulled out the sheet music. It was still there, crumpled but real. At the bottom, in tiny handwriting, was a name, Julian Voss. Elias's blood ran cold. How had he gotten this? Had someone planted it? He looked up, and a shadow moved in the distance. Someone was coming. The footsteps grew louder, and a voice called his real name, not the one he used on the streets. How did they know? What did they want with him? Elias's heart pounded like a hammer as he stood frozen in the dim subway tunnel, clutching the crumpled sheet music with Julian Voss's name scrawled at the bottom. The footsteps echoed closer, and a voice called out again, "Elias! Wait!" It was a voice he didn't know, yet it knew him his real name, not the Eli he mumbled to strangers. Panic surged through him. How did anyone know who he was? He stuffed the music back into his violin case and sprinted deeper into the tunnel, the flickering lights casting long, twisted shadows on the walls. The subway smelled of damp concrete and oil, and the air felt thick, like it was pressing against his chest. Elias's worn shoes slapped against the ground, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Behind him, the footsteps didn't stop. He glanced back and saw the man in the black coat Julian Voss running after him, his face intense but not angry. "Please, stop," Julian shouted, his voice echoing. Elias didn't trust it. Famous people didn't chase nobodies like him. Something was wrong. He ducked behind a pillar, his hands shaking as he hugged his violin case. The footsteps slowed, and Julian's voice softened. "Elias, I'm not here to hurt you. I need to understand." Understand what? Elias's mind raced. The music, his past. He peeked out and saw Julian standing under a flickering light holding that worn notebook. The crowd was gone now, the tunnel empty except for the two of them. Julian's eyes searched the shadows, and Elias felt a strange pull, like the music itself was urging him to listen. "I wrote that piece 15 years ago," Julian said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "It was for someone I lost. No one else has ever played it, so how do you have it?" Elias's stomach dropped. He didn't know. He'd found the sheet music in his case, like it had appeared by magic. Was this some kind of trick? A test? He stepped out, still clutching his violin, and faced Julian. "I don't know," Elias said, his voice cracking. "It was just there, I swear." Julian's eyes widened, and he took a step closer. "You don't understand," he said. "That music is not just notes. It's a memory, a promise." He opened his notebook, showing Elias a faded photo tucked inside a young boy with a violin, smiling. Elias's breath caught. The boy looked like him. "Who is that?" Elias whispered, his voice trembling. Julian's face softened, and he said, "That's my son. He was taken from me years ago, and you play like him." Elias's world spun. A son? Taken? He wanted to run again, but his legs wouldn't move. Julian's words hit like a tidal wave. Was this why the music felt so familiar? Why it sang in his dreams? Before he could speak, a loud clang echoed through the tunnel. A subway guard appeared, flashlight in hand. "You two, out now," he barked. Julian grabbed Elias's arm, pulling him toward the exit. "Come with me," Julian said urgently. "I can help you, but we're not safe here." Elias's mind screamed to pull away, but something in Julian's eyes hope maybe made him follow. They ran up the stairs, bursting into the busy station above. The crowd swallowed them, but Julian kept a tight grip on Elias's arm. Outside, the city lights blinded Elias, and Julian led him to a sleek black car. "Get in," Julian said, opening the door. Elias hesitated, his heart racing. Was this a trap? A chance? He didn't know. But he climbed inside, the violin case on his lap. The car sped off, and Julian turned to him, his face serious. "There's something you need to see," he said, pulling out a small locked box from under the seat. He opened it, revealing a tiny violin bowchild-sized, worn, and strangely familiar. Elias's hands shook as he reached for it. A memory flashed, a fire, A woman's scream, a boy running. Was it his? Before he could ask, the car screeched to a stop. Headlights flashed outside, and a voice shouted, "Voss, get out now!" Someone had followed them. Someone who knew Julian and maybe Elias too. The car's headlights cut through the dark city streets as Elias gripped his violin case, his knuckles white. The voice outside shouted again, "Voss, we know you're in there!" Julian's face tightened, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. "Hold on," he whispered, slamming his foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, tires screeching, as Elias pressed himself against the seat. Who was chasing them? Why did they want Julianor? Was it Elias they were after? The city blurred past neon signs, honking horns, and the glow of skyscrapers. Elias's mind spun with questions. The tiny violin bow sat between them, its wood worn smooth, like it had been held 1,000 times. It felt familiar, like a piece of a dream he couldn't grasp. "Who are they?" Elias asked, his voice shaking. Julian's jaw clenched. "People who want what I know," he said. "And now, maybe what you know." Elias's stomach twisted. He didn't know anything, just music, just survival. But the bow, the music, Julian's son, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle he didn't understand. The car swerved into an alley, the headlights behind them growing closer. Julian pulled out his phone, typing frantically. "I'm getting us somewhere safe," he said, but his voice was unsteady. Elias glanced at the phone screen and saw a name. Clara. Who was she? Before he could ask, a loud bang shook the car. The back window cracked, spiderwebbing under the force of something a bullet. Elias ducked, his heart racing. "Stay down!" Julian yelled, swerving again. They sped through the alley, trash cans toppling as they passed. Elias's thoughts flashed to the subway, to the music, to the boy in Julian's photo. Was he really connected to this famous man? Or was this a mistake? A cruel trick? The car burst onto a quiet street, and Julian slowed, his breath heavy. "We lost them," he said, but his eyes kept checking the mirrors. He pulled into a dark parking lot behind an old building, its windows boarded up. "We're here," Julian said, grabbing the violin bow and the lockbox. "Come on." Elias hesitated. This place looked like a trap, but the chase, the bow, Julian's words, they pulled him forward. He followed Julian to a rusty door, which creaked open to reveal a dimly lit room filled with instruments, violins, cellos, a dusty piano. It smelled like wood and old paper, like a forgotten music shop. Julian locked the door behind them and turned to Elias. "This was my first studio," he said. "No one knows about it, not even them." He opened the box, pulling out a letter, yellowed with age. "Read this," Julian said, his voice soft but urgent. Elias's hands shook as he took it. The letter began, "To my son, Elias." His breath stopped. His name, his real name. Before he could read more, a loud crash came from outside. The door rattled, and a shadow moved past the window. They'd been found.